This week is the last episode of Season 1 of the Standard Age podcast, but stay tuned sooner than later for Season 2 to kick off. With that said, we end Season 1 with guest Josh Herman, a ceramic artist based here in San Diego, California. We met while I was working at Allen Edmonds, and conversation just seemed to flow within minutes of meeting Josh. He is somewhat of a dry wit that alludes to a level of self-deprecation that I appreciate, while at the same time carries a certain nonchalance in his delivery that's somewhere between humility and confidence, which I also enjoy. This one takes several turns. We discuss his immersion in athletics as a child, to undergoing and studying several variations of therapy, all while ceramics was coming and going for Josh. We talk about the idea how less teaching can actually make you a better creative, the ins and outs of scaling a business when you're a one-man band, and also the inner struggles with whether or not to go on with the business. Self-reflection and self-awareness are crucial elements to this episode, and how finding your tribe is so important, and taking yourself too seriously won't exactly make you Picasso, but your experience stands a better chance of doing just that. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard Age podcast. Well, Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, it's great. Great to be on your podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me here in studio. Let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
I say this in every episode.
Okay.
Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in New York City to my parents, Marcia and Phil. I was an only child. They got divorced when I was 5 years old. And so I was raised by my mother. I saw my dad on the weekends. He lived in Manhattan. She had me in Long Island. So I was, a New York kid. I was eating, like nice foods, and I was just like a foodie. And my dad was a big Knicks fan. We used to go to the Knicks games. He had season tickets, and I was good at sports. So I really started out as a sports kid. I was very talented at sports, and
what particular sports?
I was good at all sports. So I went to a place called Kutcher Sports Academy, which is in the Catskills, and it was an all sports academy. And, you could they had everything there. So, I was doing basketball. I was good at basketball and soccer and baseball, any sport. When you're young, you haven't trained. I just was a good athlete, so I was pretty much good at all the things. But I think I was particularly good at tennis and soccer and basketball. Those are probably my three sports. So my dad loved that, and he pushed me to be an athlete. And my mom was, I think, more apathetic about it. She worked, and I saw him on the weekends, and he was giving me, trying to get me the best coaches and taking me to Florida to play with this guy with tennis, and, telling people what a great athlete I was. It was a lot of pressure, honestly. It was a lot of pushing.
Yeah, sure.
And I did take art, of course, there were art classes in my school. I went to a public school in Great Neck, Long Island. And I was, I think I exhibited some ability, but I never was encouraged to do more art. And so I never really even thought about it. I just, it just was, all I knew was being an athlete. So all through high school, that's pretty much what I did was sports.
So when you say academy.
Yeah.
But you went to public school on Long Island. So what was the academy exactly?
You mean Kutcher Sports Academy?
Yeah.
Summer camp.
Summer camp.
Summer camp.
Got it.
Yeah, and so he sent me to that camp for the full 8 weeks every summer for like 12 years in a row. All sports. During the day you had different periods. You have 1 hour periods. You could pick what sport, and then at night there was a league. And then you were in a league, so it was just sports all day.
Do they still have this? I've never heard of this.
I think they do. They do have sports camps. I mean, they have individuals, like
well,
tennis
sports
camps.
camps, sure, but this is like school for sports.
Yeah, it was pretty serious. I mean, it was pretty hardcore. I hated it. To tell you the truth, I really dreaded it, and it was not for me, and I was miserable going for the entire summer, every single summer. But
as an adult, I think about this. This sounds rad.
Well, it's a cool concept, but then you're away from your parents. I was a sensitive boy.
Got it.
And in retrospect, it wasn't quite my, like fraternity, I guess. It wasn't my nature. even though I was good at sports. So it wasn't the perfect fit for me. And it was cool. It was just a little too much. You know, if you eat like ice cream sundaes like every single day, you know, you'd probably get tired of them too eventually, right?
Yeah. Too much of anything is unhealthy.
Right, exactly.
So you mentioned you're an only child. What did your parents do?
My mother worked in radio advertising, so she sold advertising for radio stations. And my father was a stockbroker and a money manager.
Downtown?
He grew up in the Bronx on Tremont Avenue, which was a very, very tough neighborhood with no money, had nothing. He was an only child, and he used to play stickball. He used to tell me about the stickball, you know, how many manhole covers could you hit the ball? That was like the thing.
Yeah.
And he played with Al Pacino. Al Pacino was younger, so Al Pacino was like the water boy, you know, like go get my water, Al, kind of thing.
No way.
Yeah. And so I heard a lot about, you know, how difficult it was to live, you know, in the Bronx at that time and with
Sure.
nothing. So he was self-made, and he was a pretty tough customer, my dad, you know. Short, not too short, you know, he was like 5'8", but he wasn't large, but
Oh, I think meant like short fuse.
No, he wasn't a short fuse, but you wouldn't want to mess with him.
Right.
Yeah. So he was what I was saying is he's small-ish in stature, but, you know,
Larger than life.
large in strength and like, you know, willpower. So he was a tough customer.
Well, it's a tough business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
You got to have some willpower
Yes.
to do that for sure.
Oh, yes. He was a pit bull. Yeah.
Yankee fan?
Yep.
Bronx.
I have lots of stories. He used to like take me to Yankee Stadium. He took me and my stepbrothers to Yankee Stadium, the World Series. We didn't have tickets and we didn't have anything, and he got us in, and
The gift of gab?
the gift of a $20 bill.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
The high five?
Yeah, he thought that he thought that all of life's problems could be solved with a $20 bill, and he's mostly right. But yeah, he, you know, instead of handing the guy tickets, he, you know, hand him a $100 bill or $100.
Right. Just let me through.
He just, you know, put 100 in his hand, and then we'd get in, and then he'd have to grease the usher and to get the seats, and, you know, so he would operate like that.
That's so like stereotypical New York.
Totally.
Old New York.
They don't really make them like him anymore, tell you the truth. He was you know, one of a kind.
No.
And that's just one story. I mean, I could tell you like 10 stories.
You'll have some usher in Yankee Stadium now and be like, where are you sitting?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have a ticket.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
So that takes you through high school, basically, right? So what, college?
So then I didn't know what I really wanted to do with myself. You know, I was good at sports, but I wasn't, you know, going to be professional in any sport. So I went to a small business school in Boston, in Wellesley, which is outside of Boston. It's called Babson.
Yeah.
And I learned quickly that, you know, that wasn't for me. I mean, wasn't an ideal situation, you know, being around kids that were, you know, solely focused on, you know, like money and business, and I don't think Boston was a great fit for me, and it was cold. I mean, real cold, and I didn't like that, and so I ended up transferring to a small school in Los Angeles called Pitzer College, which was part of the Claremont colleges. I applied there. I applied to NYU, which I really wanted to go to because it was close to home. I was freaked out about going to another place I wasn't going to be happy with. So I got into NYU, and I also got into Pitzer, and my impulse was to go to NYU. That was like the safe thing, but I guess somehow I knew that Pitzer was the best, you know, place for me. And so I went, and I was very nervous. The first day, I got there early because I was a place kicker. I was a soccer player, but I was very good at place kicking. So I did that for the football team in high school.
Right.
So the football season starts the first semester. So I had to get there like 2 weeks before school started for preseason, for
Practice.
Yeah. And so I got to the suite. By the way, is this good? Did I tell like long-winded? Like I tell you stories?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know how much information you want, but I figure you can edit
this is
out
your
whatever
time.
you want.
No,
Yeah.
this is your time.
So I get to it's a good story. So I get to the dorm, you know, and I walk in, and sitting in the common room. So there was a common room and then 3 rooms on one side and then 3 rooms on the other side. So sitting in the common room, walking with my bags, are like 3 or 4 of the RAs, the resident assistants. They're there early also, to whatever they were doing as
create
resident
organization
assistants.
or something.
Yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, come on, sit down. So they had beers, they were like drinking beers. I mean, it was like the middle of the day. I don't know. I forget what time it was, noon or something like that. They were drinking some beers. There was a couple guys, a couple girls. And I think they had a bong. I think they were smoking weed. And they were like, come on, sit down, hang out. And I started hanging out. And I had a beer, and I took a hit. And it was like...
This is day one.
Day one. Day, not even day one. Day, this is like, first 10 minutes. And I could just feel that everything that I wanted was going to be California. That I found my place.
This was not business school.
No, this was not business school, and this was not New York. It just felt like right for me, and that I knew in that first 10 minutes, that I wanted to live in California. I was going to be happy at the school, and then I was in a good place. So that was quite a moment revelation right there. Like, wow, I feel something I never felt like in my life. Just the attitude, the environment, just all of that. And so I ended up going to Pitzer, which I loved. Is a very liberal kind of, not hippie trip, but it was on that end of the spectrum, kind of a place. And I was an economics major just because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up taking Introduction to Pottery or Introduction to Ceramics at Pitzer. So Pitzer's part of the Claremont Colleges. There's 5 schools. There's Harvey Mudd and Pomona and Pitzer. They're all schools that abut next to each other. I took Introduction to Ceramics at Pitzer, and I remember the professor sat down that night and he did a demo. He started throwing cups on the wheel. And I hadn't even touched the clay yet, but I could feel, like, just watching him, that I was very intrigued, and that I felt that this was going to be, I could tell the feeling I was having, that I was going to like doing ceramics, and that it was going to be something that worked for me. And that's how I really found ceramics. And so I took ceramics. I think I took second semester ceramics. And then people started saying to me, if you're into ceramics, you have got to go to Scripps. Scripps was an all-girls college that was right across the street from Pitzer. Luckily enough for me, you were allowed to take any of your courses, all of your major, at any of the colleges.
Because they were all in the same organization.
They were all part of the Claremont colleges, yes. So and because this teacher, that was the ceramics teacher at Scripps, was like a famous guy. This is what they told me. Paul Soldner. You got to check him out. So
now, is he still around?
He passed away 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
He was at the end of his
tenure,
professorship. He was 72 at the time. I was probably the last student who went through with him, so I was lucky. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I went over there, and it was just perfect for me. He was a really great guy and really interesting, and his teaching philosophy was just in line with who I was and who I am. And
so, what was that like?
So he told a story about when he was in art class. He did a painting, and the teacher said to him, "Oh, look, Paul made a fried egg. It was a sunrise." And he decided in that moment that he was never going to do art again. He was so,
discouraged.
Yeah. And so I think his philosophy was that he was very influenced by Zen, Zen and Eastern philosophies. And I think that the way he taught was the best teachers are the ones that you sort of don't even know are there. And so he would teach through example. He worked in the studio with the other students. He made things, not in back in the back. He had a table in the main studio, and he would work. And a class would be 2.5 hours, and he'd do a demo for like 10 minutes, and then that would be class.
That's genius.
Yeah, and then he'd be like, somebody paid for you to be here, but I don't care. You can come or go. Somebody paid for you to be here, so if you want to hang out, you can, or you can do whatever you want. I don't
So
really
he really
care.
did want to make art at the end of the day and found a way to get paid to make art and only teach for 10 minutes.
Well, I think that's true, but I think there was a method to that, and I think his feeling was that he was helping people find their own motivation, right? And allowing people their own have freedom to explore, and that interest would come more authentically, more naturally, if given the freedom to find themselves. Yeah. So he didn't really care, and he didn't feel that he should be critiquing work. Who's to say like this is good? Like I might like it, but you may not like it. So it's not. I don't think it's my place to say this is good or this is bad. So he didn't grade that way. He just graded by volume. If you made 50 pieces on the wheel, you'd get a C. If you made 75, you get a B. If you made 100, you get an A. He didn't care what anything looked like. It was just the amount of work that you made.
Do you think that's because equating quantity with or volume rather with a better grade, better meaning
A's,
the A's? Is that because he knew that practice makes perfect kind of thing? And
I think so. I think it wasn't about if you made good things. I think it was about just making things, and
right.
having that interest and spending the time in the studio. And he didn't want people to feel insecure, like I don't have talent or I can't make nice things. He didn't want the pressure of, are my things good? He just wanted people to experiment, try things, fail.
I think that's
that
so
sort of
interesting,
thing.
given that he
brilliant.
was discouraged by a teacher and then became a teacher.
Yes. He was Mennonite, and so it was a very loving. He claims it was a very sort of loving, supportive environment that he grew up in, and he just realized in that moment where he was critiqued by that teacher that did not support his interest. It didn't support his confidence or his wanting to explore, clay and being creative as an artist.
Even I was going to say
any
even
kind of creativity,
even creativity,
any
in
kind
itself.
of creativity. So. He, I think that was a real gift that he passed on to the students. And he was a fun guy. So, I mean, we would have parties. So every Thursday night was graduate seminar, which was for the graduate students. So there was a graduate program, considered one of the top graduate programs. And he had the graduate students in amongst the undergraduates. So that was a real great thing because we were learning from the graduate students. Sure. And that graduate seminar we'd go to his house, which was super cool, near the college. He did bonsais. Everything he did with his own hands. That was like his thing. He didn't think we should be hiring people to build our own house. Like we should learn how to build your house and make things, like be self-sufficient. So he did bonsai, and he knew how to do all kinds of cool things. And so we'd go over to his house, and then we'd have a potluck. Everybody bring food and beer, socialize.
So it truly was a community.
Totally.
That's awesome.
Totally. And then after dinner, he would do some topic. Sometimes it was related to clay, and sometimes it wasn't. It could be, how do you photograph your work? How do you ship your work? Like, how do you build a shipping crate? It could be, how do you make wine out of dandelions? He knew how to do all kinds of cool stuff like that. He'd just teach us things that he knew how to do that were like super cool. And then, he'd do slides and he'd talk, and maybe that'd be 20 minutes, half an hour. And then after that, that was done. And then it was like a hot tub party. He had a big hot tub that he made, and we would all jump in the hot tub and,
What was it made from?
Concrete, and he had a big shrub around. It was a triangular hot tub, and he had a big shrub around it, so there was like some privacy, and it was cut like a dragon, I guess. We called it Nessie. It had like a little head. Yeah. And no, it was totally cool. I mean, a big hot tub. Like 20 people, you could go in there,
That's insane.
Yeah. So it was fun. And then in the studio, he had all kinds of kilns. That's another thing. In most of the schools, I think it's very restrictive. Like you have to pass a certain standard before you can fire a kiln, and you have to, it's very restricted. You have to do blah 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 before you can mix a glaze. Paul didn't have any of that. There was a sign-up sheet. If you wanted to fire a kiln, go ahead and try. And
just don't burn yourself.
Yeah. So sometimes, I remember in the beginning, I would put some pieces in a kiln with some of the grad students, and I'd learn how to fire this kiln. And it had all different types of kilns: salt kilns, high-temperature salt kilns, low-temperature, all kinds of kilns that you could try. Raku kilns, and it was all there to use as you liked, when you liked, pretty much without restriction. So I remember being there at night with friends. We'd drink a beer, we'd be making pottery, and we'd have the raku kiln going, and I'd come back to my room at, midnight smelling like smoke, and my friends would be hanging out, and I'd come back. And, I loved the environment. It was fun. We were hanging out with people. Paul was great. He used to have big parties where, people from outside the school would come. And he was just kind of a larger-than-life guy, and we all loved him, and it was just fantastic. I loved it. So I really
amazing.
fell in love with it, and I really credit Paul with my approach to clay, and he really gave me a gift. So that was just a super fortuitous thing that I landed, there at that time. With Paul at the end. It was just a perfect situation.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
And this all stemmed from you traveling from New York to California, which historically, at least in your life, it seemed, you didn't want to be away from home.
Right.
And then you got as far away from home in the continental United States as you could almost.
Yes. And I
which
stayed
is
here.
just the irony behind
Yep.
that as well.
Yep.
That's so amazing.
Well, I think I was scared to be away from home. I wasn't happy, but I was scared. So that's
but you
what
found
was driving me.
And then you found your community.
Then I found it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yes. Yes.
Which honestly takes us, okay, so you're graduating, right?
Yes.
At this point.
Yes.
What were some of your initial jobs out of college? Or were you immediately doing your own thing?
So I moved to San Diego right after college. I found a little apartment in Pacific Beach on Law Street with a couple of buddies of mine. So my friends, not the ceramic friends, like I had a group of friends, and they were like Rasta types, like they had dreadlocks, a Jewish guy, a black guy, an assortment of guys. But we all liked reggae. And they got jobs at a law firm as document clerks, and they were not required to cut their dreads. That was a big deal because the guys from the year before that graduated that were our friends worked there. The firm loved them, and the firm said, do you have friends that can do the same job, which were my friends with the dreadlocks. So they came down. We rented a place together on the beach. They worked at the law firm, and then I had a studio at the house. And we would go surf and such. So I was basically making things that first year to 2 years. I think we lived in that house.
Oh, that's amazing. So right out of college.
Right out of college, I just kept making ceramics.
That's great.
They worked at the law firm. I had a dog. We surfed. We had fun, and that lasted for a couple of years, and then I applied for graduate schools. I decided I was going to go to graduate school for ceramics. And
same school?
I could have, but I think Paul had retired at that point. So I ended up going to University of South Carolina for graduate school.
Gamecocks.
The Gamecocks.
Wow.
I know you're from North Carolina.
So back across the country.
Back across the country. And the way that happened was there was a woman who was not a student at Scripps, but she was a ceramic artist. There were some people that were there as artists just to be around Paul, and he invited artists to come work there. And she was an older woman that I was friends with, and she had a friend who was the professor at University of South Carolina.
I see.
And she said, listen, you should apply to University of South Carolina. I think it could be a good situation for you. I know her, this woman, and give it a whirl. So I applied there. I got into University of Michigan at the time. Actually, I didn't get in. I was the second person. I did not get in. And then they called me and said the person that they admitted is declining our invitation. And you're like, we would like to have you if you would like to come. I thought I was at that point just going to South Carolina, and so I flew to Michigan, and it was kind of a rainy day, and I ended up just going to South Carolina. So,
plus you had the cold,
right,
in Ann Arbor.
Yeah. I flew in, and it was like a gray, rainy. If it was sunny, I think that would have made a difference. So I ended up going to South Carolina, and I was the graduate assistant. I had a stipend. I had a full scholarship plus a stipend. They paid me to work as the, firing the kilns and assisting mixing the glazes and doing all the
So
things.
they were paying you to go there,
basically, which was a fairly common thing.
Oh,
it wasn't
okay.
like a super unusual. It was a good deal,
Yeah.
But somewhat common, I think. Right now. I think it's more competitive. Even then, it was competitive to get into graduate school for ceramics. These programs would only take one or two, and they might have 30 or 40 applications. So it wasn't easy to get into some of these programs.
Got it.
So it was a good deal, and I went down there, and it just did not work. Like it just did not work, And I could, at one point in my life, I could blame it all on, the faculty and the school, but I think realistically, I was equally to blame, for that whole situation not working. I was, 24 or something like that, and I had just come from Paul Soldner's program, which was very unique. And this was a more like standard kind of like program. And I don't want to say bad things about her. I don't even need to say her name, It's fine, And we didn't get along. It wasn't a good fit. I did not feel it was a good situation for me. I didn't handle it that well, and so I ended up leaving after 1 year. Just wasn't a good fit.
So you gave it a full year, though?
I gave it a year.
And academic year?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes, and I made a lot of things. I had my own private studio, but it was a very painful, experience. And it was a very, very bad experience. I don't want to say bad experience. I don't want to, put a value judgment on. But it was a very difficult thing. It was very painful. And I left after a year on bad terms with the,
the university.
Yeah, pretty much.
Or at least the program.
Yeah, the art program. And I went to New York. My dad lived in New York, so I went to New York. And I was in such a bad place from that whole experience that I threw away my tools. I threw away all my books. I threw away all my formulations. I took all the work that I made. I threw it all away. I just totally washed my hands of everything ceramics. I had an apartment full of ceramics. I just made a ton of stuff, and I just dumped it all, smashed it, and put it down an incinerator in the building with a hammer.
I'm sitting here with my mouth open.
I know,
just
right?
like baffled.
Yeah.
It was that bad.
I'm
not saying it's not warranted. I'm saying
that I was in a bad place.
That's remarkable. That
yes. I think when you're 21 or 22, you're just starting to become an individual, like a grown-up person. You're starting to learn about your own, or you're starting to see your own patterns of behavior, your own psychologies, your neurosis, your feelings about, your deep feelings about relationships, authority,
Just becoming
the
more
world.
self-aware.
You don't realize when you're a teenager, I don't know if you really, or at least for me, I wasn't learning about myself in that way. Things are taken care of for you. You're in a structured environment. Yes, there might be issues, but you're not quite mature enough to be self-reflective in that way. You're just trying to deal with high school or junior high school.
100%.
Or college. You're partying, you're drinking at night and, chasing girls or whatever you're doing that's not being self-reflective, right? Then you kind of get out into the world, and then all of a sudden you start seeing, I have certain beliefs about, relationships. I have certain beliefs about this and like that. And I think that whole experience with South Carolina really brought me to my own inner struggles and my own limitations, depression, all the things that I had inside me kind of just came out. And I think that I was in a bad place, as a person, and I needed to deal with it, look at it and such. So I got rid of all of my things, and I remember going to the office with my dad. His office was in the World Trade Centers at the time, so I remember spending, 4 months or something like that in there. And just sitting there while, he had 2 desks, and he was trading, and I had worked on the floor of the exchange. I had experience with the stock market. When I was, in high school, he got me a job on the floor of the exchange.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had some, experience with that. And I was pretty good at math, so, it was a pretty good fit. And I knew a little bit about the stocks, and so, we used to sit there and look at the screens and make calls and so forth. I really just didn't know what I wanted to do. I was kind of disoriented.
Just filling the time.
Airing out after South Carolina. Sure. And I always had, a secondary interest in cooking. My mother cooked. And I tell people cooking is not really much different than ceramics. You work with your hands. It's creative. It's really not that different. So I'm not surprised that I had an interest in food. I always sort of had a secondary interest in it, and I casually inquired about a cooking school and in just trying to figure out who I was. So I think what had happened was I had contacted a cooking school in New York City. It was a vegetarian cooking school. It was considered one of the best vegetarian cooking schools in the country.
Well, it was probably one of the only ones at the time, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's called Natural Gourmet Vegetarian Cooking School.
Because this is what year?
So I graduated college in 91. So this is probably 95. And so I must have just called and inquired, and they had me on their mailing list or the contact list. And so while I was at the office one day, I got a phone call from a woman who was from the school, and she said, "Oh, we'd love to show you the kitchen, and why don't you just come over and check it out?" She was very slick, and before I knew it, I was doing this. I was enrolled in a 4-month chef's training program, which I did, and I loved it. It was a great program. I met my wife there, so that was probably the best reason. The best thing that came out of that program.
Certainly a bonus.
Yes, and it was a good transition for me, coming out of the ceramics and the bad feelings, and it was a positive, it was a win for me. And I did food for a couple of years. I cooked privately. I worked in a couple of restaurants in New York. I got into pastry. I liked pastry because it was kind of sculptural, and I worked in Oriel, which is kind of a fancy restaurant in New York. And for one day I worked in there, and the pastry department, I went down there, and they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and I just thought it was cool. So I did pastry, and some things happened with that. But anyway, I did that for a couple of years, and at the same time, I befriended a man named Gary Eisenstadt, who was a teacher at the cooking school. And he was a really interesting guy. While he was done food, he also was studying different types of therapies, psychotherapies, that he was using in work that he was doing with people. Hypnotherapy was like one of the things. He had done the Forum, and he had done a few things. And he called it radical sanity. And he said to me, hey, why don't you come in and do a session, check it out? And, yeah, sure, I would love that, So I went in there and I started to work with him as a client. And it was great, because it was the first time that I really started to do like self-exploration, started to look at myself. I started to learn that I was, I had some real issues. I was depressed, and he was the first one who really helped me, with that. And I think he was a bit of a father figure to me that my father wasn't. So, and we developed a relationship. We had done things together. He would invite me to his house. We traveled to India together. He used to go to India on a regular basis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he introduced me to India. We did motorcycle trips together. I mean, we were good friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What were you riding?
BMW motorcycles.
Like GS, Enduro bikes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we had a GS. We had like a R, like a basic, we did a trip around the country.
Awesome.
And then after some period of time, he said, why don't I start training you to be a therapist? You could be sort of like my apprentice. And I thought, wow, okay. Yeah, maybe I could do that. I mean, it really had a big effect on me as a person. I really grew, and the word healed comes, but there was changes, in me, and it really opened my eyes to a lot about myself. So I said, sure, I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself, so I just said yes, and I started to, study this radical sanity with him. And I did a hypnotherapy training, and I did the Forum, and I went to Gay and Kathleen Hendricks in Santa Barbara and did some of their trainings, body-centered psychotherapy. And I went to Portland, and I did the process intensive, which I loved, which is kind of a different type of process-oriented psychology, which was right up my alley because it was process oriented. So I did all these things, and
so over what time period was all of this? Because it
couple
sounds like
years.
you did a lot.
It was
so
a
like
couple
2 years.
Yeah, a couple years at the time. I started to see clients. I had not gone to graduate school. I didn't have I wasn't an MS or social worker or anything like that. I hadn't done any of those things. He designed like a formal training that another gal from the cooking program did, and then a few other people did. So it was like a radical sanity program. So we were all seeing clients. I mean, maybe like 6 of us. But Gary and I were like the closest, and then we had gone to India a couple of times, and then he said, I'm going to go to India, and you just work with clients. And then we had talked about a lot of different, we always bandied about like maybe we'll run trips to India and take people, and crazy enough, I dropped him off at the airport. He was going to India, and I got a call 3 days later. They found him dead in a hotel room in India. He OD'd, heroin overdose. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I knew he had done heroin, and I knew he had dealt with that, and he had some tough stuff going on in his life, but that was a very, difficult thing for me. Yeah. Because he was like a father figure to me, and he was the first one who really, helped me and, like loved me unconditionally. And it was, that was a really hard thing for me. And so I was living in San Diego at the time. I had lived in I moved to San Francisco for a couple years, and I didn't like it. I don't know, San Diego was better for me, less traffic and just whatever. Gary was living here, so I moved to San Diego, and then that happened, and that was right about, no, so what happened was I went to India with his son, and I brought his ashes back. He wanted to be his ashes like put in the Ganga River, which was the river in the Himalayas. And so I did this thing with his son, and we went to the mountain, and we put his ashes in the river, and then right at that point I was thinking, I want to be in a relationship. I want to be with a woman, one person. And when I got back, I called Rachel. Rachel and I had broken up for some period of time, and I called her. I hadn't seen her in a while, and then that's when we got sort of like back together. And I got her to come out to San Diego.
Rachel, obviously,
my current wife, yeah. So we got back together. I was still doing therapy, and I met a man. His name is Jimmy Lehrman, and he is a very brilliant therapist. And I started working with him as a client, and he started to guide me on how to reinforce my therapy. And I ended up doing this training and then working in this method called Hakomi, it's a present-centered, mindfulness-based psychotherapy. It's using your in-the-moment experience as a way of studying self and who you are, and it was very natural for me. So I did the training. It was in San Francisco. I used to fly up to San Francisco once a month. Jimmy was sort of guiding me. He was brilliant. He was on a whole nother level from Gary. Gary was just kind of figuring things out. Jimmy wrote books, and Jimmy's super brilliant guy, great guy, still in my life, really, really interesting guy. But he pushed me to do the Hakomi training, which was a fantastic thing for me. I saw clients and I practiced for 3 or 4 years, and I was right at the point where I had to get my degree. If I wanted to be a therapist, I was going to have to get a master's degree and get certification. And there's a whole story why I decided to not do that, but the short of it is I wasn't completely satisfied sitting in the office working with clients, doing this type of therapy with people. Something was missing for me, and there was some struggle in being the therapist and doing that. So I decided in that moment, after 10 years of doing this whole therapy track, that I wanted to get back into ceramics. So
that's the 10-year break.
I took a 10-year break, and I did this therapy thing. Now, the Hakomi training, which I was in there for 2 years, and then I was a staff member for 2 years, assisting new students coming through. So I had advanced pretty far in the whole Hakomi track. The training is about sitting with people. How do you sit with someone? The nuts and bolts of sitting with someone and being with someone. And in essence, the Hakomi training is you're doing a lot of therapy on yourself because you're doing a lot of practice sessions. You're a client. You're a therapist, but you're also a client, and you're doing a lot of training. I would call it personhood training. There's certain principles that Hakomi is, nonviolence and organicity and mindfulness. And these principles, you begin to embody those principles as a person. And that's what the method is about, and that's sort of who you become. So there's a lot of personal transformation and growth that happens when you go through the Hakomi training. So my point is that after that 10-year period, I was basically a new person, a different person, completely different person. More developed, more self-aware, had dealt with a lot of the things that I was pretty much unconscious about, when I was in South Carolina, before I had done any of this. So I decided I was going to get back to clay, and my first goal was to be an artist, as just make things and establish myself. And then my second goal was to teach and maybe integrate ceramics and some of the therapy work, some of the Hakomi stuff that I had done.
Yeah.
So I got back into clay, and I was like a totally new person. And it was great. That was a really interesting process to get back in the studio and to work with a new awareness and to have a different mindset and to make things. And, I just was happy. I was happy making things again.
This week's episode is brought to you by Passion Fine Jewelry, located in Solana Beach, California. Owners Tim and Jana Jackson provide you with some of the finest independent watches while also carrying a wide array of fine jewelry. Tim is GIA certified, and they have a goldsmith on staff for all of your custom needs, resulting in a warm, welcoming customer service experience with a level of knowledge that's truly second to none. Pay them a visit the next time you find yourself in Southern California, or visit them online at passionfinejewelry.com. Tim also has a blog, independentintime.com, that allows for a deeper dive into all things horology, so check that out as well. Now back to my conversation with Josh. Well, let me ask you this. How did your products change? So say the stuff that you made in college, right out of college, like what were some of those pieces that you made then, and how did they compare to this new you? Were they different, similar?
I think it was different, not completely different, but...
So what did you make right after college?
I mean, I was in a graduate program. I was making art pieces, but I couldn't really speak much to what I was making. I don't think I knew what I was doing. I was doing something. I was making things. I was trying to express myself, and I was trying to be authentic in my expressions. But I didn't understand what I was doing. I didn't really know what my work was about. It was funny, when I finished that first year of graduate school, I was trying to grok in words, and what am I doing? And what I came up with was that my work was about healing somehow, like healing myself, healing other people. I didn't really know how. Before I went to graduate school, I had done a shiatsu training program, which was like 5-element theory. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Chinese, like acupuncture, they talk about energies in the body, air, fire, water, and they characterize the different energies. And so I knew a little bit about that, and I felt like working with ceramics was fire, air, and water, and all those things. And I saw that there was some like sort of relationship, and I knew I was working with the energies of nature in trying to work with ceramics. And I just felt like I was doing something that was like a healing related thing. That was about as much as I could say about it at the time. And then when I came back, I just had a much more connected view of what I was doing, a much more like sort of sophisticated. I wasn't as I guess unconscious. I think my work just became more clear. I was more prolific. My work became more, sort of defined. And
what physically were you making after college? Like, were they more abstract pieces?
I was always abstract, which is the funny thing. I always was abstract. Paul made abstract things, and I made abstract things. So I always was an abstract artist. And I think that goes to like more of that. Like I'm more of a feeler. I'm not a head guy. I'm like a heart guy. I'm a body-centered person. Hakomi is a body-centered psychotherapy. It's a mindfulness kind of thing. What's happening in the moment? What are you feeling? And what is your experience at any given moment? And that I always have been that. That's just by my nature.
So
that's who I was.
More visceral than cerebral.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes, and that's what abstract art is. In my opinion, that's what my work is about. It's about circumnavigating the thinking, rational mind, which I don't feel is who we are. I think who we are is a deeper part of ourselves. It's what we feel in the body is more of the truth of who we are in any given moment.
Because you can't fake that.
Can't fake that. So people get stuck in the head, and I think that's one of the problems with like this our culture. Eastern cultures are more, body centered, being centered. Is I think that we're very intellectually oriented. Even in the art world, it's very conceptual. So art is about the concept of your art. Talk about your art. What is the concept? Like, what are you trying to say? I hate going to a piece and I know that I'm supposed to be figuring out what is the commentary of that piece.
What it means.
Yes, I don't
Right.
like that. I don't feel that's, art's highest, like purpose, I think it's something else. And well, I don't know. I can talk all about, what my art is about also, but
Well, let's rewind then.
Yeah.
So after your 10-year break,
mm-hmm.
what about your approach changed in making art? Or was it just you
Well,
were more in tune to the feeling aspect as
I think
opposed to...
Yeah, I just think I just got back into it, just a freer person. I don't think what I made was really that much different. I just think I was more consciously connected, so I was able to go from one thing to the next thing to the next, and to be viscerally connected to a sense of enjoyment and to knowing, okay, I want to make this next, and I want to do this, and I think that my sculptures became more sophisticated because I was more connected to myself. I was more conscious about myself. So I think my art just was it was like a whole nother level of evolution of the sophistication of the things that I was making.
Now, sophistication meaning in its construction?
Yeah,
Or
no,
in its visual
the expression.
presence?
Yeah. Like I think if you saw some of the work I made before, you might think it's cool. I don't know. I just think my work was more expressive and more. It's just a higher level of authenticity, I guess is
Cool.
what I could say.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was. I think you could see the work before and see the work afterward and say, okay, yeah, it's the same artist.
And you were selling pieces borderline out of the gate? Or like when did this become a business?
Okay. So this is actually a good story. So when I first moved back to San Diego, right? I was in San Francisco. I decided I want to live in San Diego. Gary was still alive. I found an apartment on Balboa Park. It was a cool apartment. Gary always encouraged me, live big, like it's a nice apartment, like costs a little bit more money, get it. You don't know when, you don't know how long you're going to be here kind of thing, right? So like, enjoy yourself, live your life like that. Okay. I needed to get furniture. So I started looking around at furniture. I ended up strolling into like a shop on Park Boulevard. It was a modern, like vintage modern shop. I just liked the furniture. I didn't know it was modern or anything. I just thought the furniture was cool. And I ended up buying an arc lamp. It's called an arc lamp. It was a marble base, like a rectangular marble base, and then a piece of metal that kind of arced up about 7 feet into the air, and then it arced over, and then there was like a round globe fixture on the end. Well, that's a very iconical lamp, And I just thought it was cool, so I bought it. And then I bought like a Scandinavian teak dining set, which I liked. And I started getting into this type of furniture. And I started to learn a little bit about modernism. I didn't really know much about modernism. All I knew is I liked the furniture. Well, there was another shop in Little Italy called Boomerang. And I started to go in there and become a customer. And the owner of that shop, his name is Dave Skelly. And I started to, I guess, just buy some things just because I was attracted to it. And then Dave basically saw my work. I was living in Point Loma in a house with my wife and our kids, and I was working out of the garage. When I got back into Clay, that's where I started, in the 2-car garage of my house in Talbot. Started making things. I wasn't selling. I wasn't showing. I wasn't nothing. I was just making stuff that I was getting off on. And I made a lot of pottery, and I was making little sculptures. I was full of energy. I just made a lot of stuff.
And Rachel is working?
No. Rachel might have been doing a little bit of cooking. She didn't. I told Rachel before she came out and moved that I didn't really want like a big career woman. I wanted a mom for my kids, you know.
Got it.
I didn't want a wife that had like, you know, an attorney who was going to be gone 10 hours a day.
Right,
You know?
right.
And she was cool with that. So that was like our agreement.
As long as the understanding's there.
That was
right?
our agreement, right? She was totally cool with it. So Dave came over. Not exactly. Somebody else came over that knew Dave, who knew about ceramics, who worked with Dave, and was just like, his name was Brian, and he like walked into my garage, and he was like,
Just mind blown.
yeah, he was just like, whoa. I didn't think anything. I was just making my stuff. You know, I didn't really think about it. And I didn't have any texture glazes. I had a little kiln. I was just yutzing around with regular glazes. I have a couple pieces over there I could show you that from that period. And he was just like, oh, whoa, you know. He told Dave, and then Dave saw my stuff, and then Dave was like, why don't you bring some of your stuff into the shop?
Boomerang.
Boomerang has vintage, modern, and current, newly made, old designed modern furniture and house furnishings. Furniture, paintings, accessories, everything modern.
So like Herman Miller and
Herman
things like
Miller, all of that kind of stuff. I can't even think of the names right now, but I didn't know anything about modernism, really. I liked the furniture. I had bought something. Knoll.
So he's got like Barcelona chairs.
You know, new ones.
Eames chairs.
Vintage ones, Ames chairs. Yeah, all that kind of thing,
Sure.
which I thought was super cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I brought my things in there. Boom. He sold everything like overnight. So then he said, let's do like a show, like a formal like show, you know, where we have an opening in the shop. And I was like, okay, you know. And there were lots of people there, so many people. And he made a poster, and they just sold everything.
So is this kind of like a meet the artist type of thing too, or was it?
Yeah,
were you
I was there.
You were there. Yeah.
Okay. I was there. It was like an art opening, you know, the art, I guess. I mean, he's not an art gallery, but everybody bought stuff. Everybody, and I was just like, kind of blown away, you know. I didn't even know what modernism was, honestly, and these people were so into it. Then Dave said, you know, that did so well. Why don't we make like a permanent, like, section for you in the shop? He had these like shelves built right in the middle of the shop. It's in Little Italy, and he had like a permanent, like Josh Herman ceramics like area in the shop.
And completely unrestricted, like you could bring in whatever you want,
Yeah,
or were they all vases? Or
no,
like,
whatever you made, just bring it
That's awesome.
in. Yeah, sculptures, pottery, whatever. Yeah, just bring it in, you know. And people were just really into it. And then so I started to learn about modernism, you know. What is modern principles? What is modern design? What is modern, you know. I mean, all I knew is I liked the furniture. And so it turned out that the things that I made were extremely right in the pocket of what modern was. That I was just a natural modern person. My aesthetic was modern. My work was modern. My interest was like a modern, which I had no idea until this all happened.
So without making it too pedestrian, what would you describe modernism as? Like in the Cliff's Notes version, like what would define modern?
Modern, and I don't consider myself an expert, even to this day, in modernism. Like, I don't consider myself a purist modernist person. I know about modernism. My definition of modern is form and function, simplicity, simple use of materials, minimalist design, clean. Inside and outside flows together. I don't know. I'm not very articulate about it even to this day. So I don't study modernism. I just know about it because I'm collected by the modern community.
I just wanted to know how you feel about it.
Yeah. I think it's clean. A lot of the modern art is abstraction. They love abstract art. So I don't know, it just fit like perfectly in there. So I started being collected by the modern community, who is very vigorously interested in architecture and their houses. People want to set their houses up in modernist things. And there's not that many accessories. There's not that much stuff, to put in modern homes. That's a sculpture, and, there's stuff was made in the 50s, but there wasn't that much like contemporary, like current things. So there was a market for it, and we sold a lot of things. And then being in his shop, apparently other modernist shops, owners, and people interested in modern things would go to Dave's shop. I think Dave is pretty well known in Southern California. He's been published as, sort of a modern aficionado, design aficionado. And so a lot of modern people would go through his shop and see my work. And then I started getting phone calls. Would you like to sell in my shop? Would you like to put some things here? Would you like to sell in my shop? And so in not very long, and not having done any marketing, I was in shops all over the place, like all over, United States.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then I was in like Neiman Marcus and, bigger named shops. And then I was picked up by Design Within Reach, which I had mentioned to you. So they placed a very large order, and I was then put in their catalogs, and I became a designer for Design Within Reach. And and concurrently at the time, I designed this, or I was working on this volcanic glaze, a texture glaze, which was a modern kind of thing. And Brian Forward, who was the man who sort of introduced me into the modernism, introduced me to Dave, he had suggested, why don't you look at these texture glazes? So I started to look at them, and I started developing texture glaze. I took a glaze calculation course from a man named Robin Hopper, who wrote the book on like glaze calculation. I went to Canada. It was like a 2-week intensive on glaze testing and glaze formulation, and I started, I learned how to do all of that, and I started testing this, volcanic glaze. I started working on it, and I started having some success, and I started putting it on the pottery, and I started to sell it to all these places, that were carrying my things. And by the way, now I was in a shop in Seattle and a shop in Los Angeles. And so all these markets, all the people that were shopping in these shops were being exposed to my work, in these stores.
And this volcanic glaze sort of just became your signature.
So the volcanic glaze became my calling card, and people loved it, and I sold a lot of things. And originally, I was hand making all of the things. So by the time I finished making for the shop here, the first shop needed more things. So I had to start making for the next shop.
Now, you call it volcanic glaze because of its appearance. It looks like volcanic rock, and it's porous kind of aesthetic.
Yes, it can be called a lot of things. A lava glaze, a texture glaze, a volcanic glaze. I just call it volcanic. I like the word volcanic, and I think it fits.
It looks like volcanic rock.
Yes, it looks like a volcanic rock.
Yeah.
So and I was doing a lot of testing, thousands of tests every night. I'd run tests. I'd run tests and fire, trying to figure out what each material was doing in the glaze. And I was selling more and more things. Now, the glaze is very difficult to work with, so I wasn't getting like consistent results. So to get one to sell, it was good enough to sell. I might have to make 5. So the more work I was getting, the more pressure I was under, because I wasn't reliably able to make the pieces.
Right.
In addition, my nature is not to make the same things over and over again. So, and also making pottery, I liked making pottery, but I didn't like making the same things continually. I would get bored. And also pottery wasn't exactly my passion. The sculpture was my passion. Meanwhile, I was selling a lot of pottery with the volcanic on it, and there was a demand for it. So, and I was working out of my garage. I needed a bigger space. I luckily found a space in Little Italy that was like 2,000 square feet that I ended up getting to rent. So I moved from my space, my little 2-car garage, which was a teeny weeny little place, to this space. Now I was able to consider a lot of different options for making the work. I wasn't really that happy, humping to make, and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to, I could only make so many things with my hands. Right. In addition, my father is all about the money. Like, how are you going to make this pencil? Now you've got the big space with a rent. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to cover the cost? How is this going to make money? It was all about just how are you going to make the money. If I was really sharp at the time, I probably would have stopped it right there. I probably would have stopped this whole thing at that point because I was enjoying selling all these pieces, and I was making a name for myself as like this design person, the ceramics. But there was a lot of pressure because I couldn't make the glazes work reliably, and I wasn't really in love with making the pottery, so over and over again. So what I did was, my dad was pushing me, so I looked, I thought about what I could do, and I decided to start this slip casting, which is basically taking a handmade piece and making a mold out of it and being able to reproduce it through a process called slip casting. It's a small scale production. There are companies that do slip casting on a large scale production, but you need a big facility, proper equipment, lots of staff, so forth. So I started small. I wasn't selling, hundreds of pieces, and I was also selling at a higher price point. So it was like heirloom quality. It wasn't, $19.99, dinnerware set from Target, right? I was selling at higher end places.
Sure.
So I started a small scale, and I started in that studio. I remember that summer, it was really hot, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I got, I tried to mix slip, and I was not familiar with it. I figured out how to do the slip casting, had the molds made, and I started slip casting. And then I filled the order for Design Within Reach, which was a very large order. It's like 100 bowls and 100 of these and 100 of these.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 45 of these. I had 5 people working for me, and I had to box everything and put it on pallets and bring it to a distribution center. And, it was like the real deal. And I thought, it could become like a big, I didn't know what was going to happen.
Well, I bet Dad liked the sound of this.
He loved it. I remember when I called him and I said I got picked up by Design Within Reach, and, it was like a big deal, right? I forget how much the order was. It was over $100,000, for the order. And Design Within Reach, their catalog goes to, I don't know how many people. I think it's, 500,000 every time they send a catalog out. So the fact that I was in the catalog, I was being exposed to a lot of different people.
Absolutely.
And I was in Ceramics Monthly. I was an emerging artist, and I was in the New York Times, and I was in Architectural Digest. I was getting exposure everywhere. And I didn't do any marketing. That was the crazy thing. I had my foot on the brakes. I was trying to keep a lid on it because I was so under the gun every time I got an order to make those 100 bowls for Design Within Reach. I might have to fire, 300. I mean, it was a lot of pressure. I couldn't reliably make the product. The glaze is very, very temperamental. It's sensitive to temperature, sensitive to application. The materials change. I mean, all kinds of issues.
Sure. So where are you from a mindset at that standpoint? Because my brain thinks, okay, well, supply and demand, right?
You got
price
a business.
goes up.
Yeah.
So is that when you start saying, well, yeah, you want this stuff, now you're going to pay double for it? Or were you just like, I can't do that?
Well, so what happened was I sold this. I made this order for Design Within Reach. I thought it was going to just take off. It didn't. Why? I think a couple of reasons. In this country, ceramics is not, it's not on the level, it's not a respected medium. it's very hard to sell something for $500 when you can buy the same thing for $20 at Target that looks half decent, that was made, in China. If you go to Japan and you tell someone you do ceramics, they start bowing to you. Ceramics is very respected as an art form, and the people that do ceramics are very respected, and people will pay, in kind for, special things. Here,
Absolutely.
It's not like that. Ceramics is like the lowest. People are used to seeing, the guy on the corner selling the 4-pound mugs for $14. So it's hard for people to spend that kind of money on the thing that they would last to put in their house. When you build a house, you have to build the house. You have to put in, you need pots and pans before you put fancy things on the shelf. It's the last thing you spend your money on is the art for the house, right? So if there's any money left over after you built your house, you maybe would spend something on art, right?
So would you, in a food comparison, I mean, no disrespect to anybody, but
Sure.
it's almost the Mexican food because a
Yeah.
lot of people don't want to pay a lot of money for Mexican food.
Yeah, well-
I remember, do you ever watch Chef's Table on Netflix?
No.
Okay, well, you should totally check
Okay.
it out as somebody who's historically into food. But
Right.
one of the restaurants in Mexico City, he was like, look, I don't understand why Mexican cuisine can't be expensive.
Right. Yep.
And this just sort of
Totally.
jogs my memory with that.
And in addition, not only is ceramics just really not, it's not valued, it's even in the art world considered not really fine art. I mean, it's lower, it's, the painters look at ceramics, they look down at the ceramics, so ceramics, even within the art world is looked, down on,
Why do you think that is?
Well, until the 1950s, ceramics was not really an art form. It was a functional medium. It was used as cups and bowls and plates, and it was pottery. And Soldner, there's a whole story about Soldner and how ceramics started to change into, a non-functional medium. And that's a really interesting story, and that's why Paul is one of, the sort of transformational people in the ceramics world, in contemporary ceramics, because he was in that movement that transformed ceramics into like a non-functional art kind of thing.
I was just about to say, do you think it's something to the effect of, oh, well, you need certain things like a cup?
Yeah.
So
I think
it's not art.
I think a lot of it has to do with, our culture where, it's practicality, like it's, what can I use it for? What does it do? And like that. It's just hasn't been that long that, ceramics has been, sculptures have been made like this.
In an abstract manner.
Abstract or non-abstract, just in an art form. And I think galleries are more used to two-dimensional and paintings and things. And
Sure.
it's just not. It's changing. It's changed a lot, and there are galleries that are trying to sell things for proper values and higher values. And it's unfortunate, but people ask me how I get higher prices for things, and I say, if a store sells like ceramics, I usually don't want to be associated with it, because I try to associate myself more with the design world than I do with, almost the art world or the, ceramics, because people are selling ceramics for so cheap that it just doesn't make sense.
So it's about brand positioning.
It's a brand position thing, right? I
Yeah.
try to put myself as like a higher end kind of thing, which I feel that that it is. But like Design Within Reach, it didn't sell because they didn't. I feel that they didn't brand the work, so people would walk into the stores. They didn't realize that these things were for sale. They didn't know the story of the work.
They thought it was merchandising.
They thought it was just like sitting. It was like an accessory for the coffee table
to make the table look good.
Correct. The salespeople didn't know what they were selling, and the same thing happened with Neiman Marcus. And it's partially my fault. I could have had a display or a leaflet, or I could have gone into stores and met, and educated everyone about my work. And there were things I could have done that I didn't do. So I don't think that, Design Within Reach and Neiman Marcus, I don't think that they marketed the work in a way such that, it sold in the numbers that needed to sell to continue doing that, So eventually, it just didn't sell enough at those prices.
Do you think that just accidentally got lost on them, thinking that, well, everything in here is for sale and everybody would understand that?
I think
it just kind of almost subconsciously happened by accident.
I guess. I just think when you have a big organization like that, you don't have the attention to detail. The sales people in the store, are more focused on the furniture. They just weren't educated to, like a smaller person. And I think it was a big company, and it's just one of those things that, the proper attention wasn't put on it to make it,
Sure.
to make it work for them. They still use my things and photos that they took, and they use it like as accessories on their furniture in the catalogs, but it just didn't really fly, and I think it needed the story, when somebody comes in, they want to know, like, who is this artist and what is the story, and what
Sure.
are they about, and that's what creates the value, I think.
Well, I think that's an interesting transition, because when I first walked in this morning, we started to go down the path conversationally of like inspiration and where you get your stuff from, and your answer was pretty intriguing. That it kind of comes from nowhere.
Yes, and so now we're getting to like what is my work about, and it's funny, they asked me yesterday, the high school kids came in and they asked me, how do you get inspiration? Like, where do you get this work? And I said, well, that's a really good question, because that really is what the work is about. It's like, what am I doing? What is abstraction? When you make something that's totally non-representational, like it's not, there's nothing in the world that I think about. Where do you go to get these forms? Well, that's a good question. I intentionally am unintentional about my work. So when I start these pieces, you say, oh, okay, could I have sketched that ahead of time? Maybe. But I make decisions as I go in an organic fashion. I try to say, okay, let's start with a piece. I might have an idea. I'm going to work in this way with these slabs. I'm going to use these tools. I'm going to try to make something with these, flat pieces of clay that we call slabs, and see what happens. That might be as much of my plan as I have. And then I start putting things together, and I don't know where it's going, right? And that's cool. I mean, that's the unlimited road. It's like you stand in front of a field, you don't know which direction you're going to go. Well, if you go down this way, there's a whole field of possibility that's going to happen. If you go this way, there's like 10 roads you could go in that direction. If you went down this way, you're going to see a whole different thing. It's the same thing with clay. If I put this slab in this angle, and then I just decide I'm going to put the next slab at this angle, something starts happening. There's possibilities that start happening. There's a vocabulary. There's a piece that starts emerging that I could never have conceived of or preconceived. It's a discovery process, right? So in every moment, in every decision that I'm making, I'm trying to find what my authenticness is, what feels right, what needs to happen with this piece. I see something starting to happen with this piece, and then I make decisions as I go, and the piece grows. And then there's a vocabulary, there's something there. It continues to grow. I keep making those decisions, and what emerges is something that I could never have conceived of by my intellectual mind. So it comes from a more like subconscious place, like a deeper place. I feel like I'm tapping into natural energies, universal energies, previous experiences that I have, emotional content, core beliefs that I have about the world, all get expressed in these pieces. I love plants. I have plants in my house. I have a garden. I do fruit trees. I love pruning the trees. I love working with the trees. I find it very relaxing. It's the same kind of thing as working with the clay.
It's all very meditative, it seems.
Very, very meditative.
It's like a physical manifestation.
Yes, it's a very meditative process. It's a process. It's more about the process itself.
It's an evolution.
Right. It's a growth process that is an unfolding process. It's a discovery process. And then, like this piece behind, like, how could you couldn't think of that beforehand. You have to, like, it just would have to emerge sort of from my unconscious, I guess.
Do you think that's because it happens over multiple days? Like, you don't complete one project in one day, so you might come in with a different feeling tomorrow than you have today.
Yes, and that it's a very slow process, clay.
Right.
And so, yes, there's ups and downs. That's what I've been trying to record. I've been doing these videos of my process during these pieces. So, yes, there are days that I feel great. There are days that I feel like I can't do anything right, that I'll never get this piece to work. I am up, I'm down. There's all kinds of the range of emotions that I go through. A lot of it is difficulty, struggle, depression, despair. And I think that you can see that in the work. I think that, these are sort of manifestations of like inner experiences that I'm having, impulses, pain, sensation, repetitive processes that are happening, inside, my body. Like, people say, I don't feel good. Well, what does that mean? You really, I don't feel good. Like, I have a pressure in my chest. Well, if you tune into that, you would see that is a familiar feeling. Like, it's not random, that's systematic to me. And, that sensation, I can see that in the work. And so, these are what I'm trying to do is make something as authentic as possible. This is an authentic expression of who I am on the deepest level as possible in these three-dimensional forms. So I'm trying to find my authentic expression. My hope is that the viewers would be assisted in finding their own authenticity in being around my work.
It's really interesting because you've used the terms, pain and suffering basically a lot to describe sort of the impetus for these projects. I don't know how to ask this any other way. Do you ever leave in a better mood?
Totally.
Yeah, because this is the epitome of an outlet for you.
Well, what I've learned is, your experience it's like a wave. There's nothing permanent about it. So one day I could be feeling great, and the next day I could be feeling horrible. And some days the pieces are going well, and sometimes I can't do anything right. And if I'm not careful, I can get caught. That can be like a hole, like a spiral, like, oh, I feel really, really down about this. I cannot make this work. If I'm not careful, I can get lost in that. It's like a vortex. It's like a spiral going down. I feel bad, and now I'm going to make myself feel even worse and just despair kind of thing. But now, having done this a lot of times, I know that I'm in the wave, right? I'm in like a valley, and, tomorrow I'm going to be in a peak. And so I feel more comfortable in the downs and the ups. Now, like I said, when I'm working on a piece, and I solve a problem, or I get through some kind of, issue in the piece, or I finish a piece like that, it's total euphoria to get through the piece and at the end and get through that process.
It's like
and
a
it's
weight
something.
lifted.
It's like it is like the best feeling. It can be really euphoric. So yes, I have a lot of ups, I have a lot of downs, but I'm more comfortable in in that process of up and down and the struggle of the pieces. That's just sort of like it is the struggle. That's really what is it, you have to get comfortable in the struggle. You have to sort of like embrace the struggle. I think that's where, that's where success comes from, it comes from struggling. So for me, it's been learning how to just relax with the struggle, relax with the discomfort and, the negativity that I may have at any time. And I think working on the pieces works through that. And, it's very therapeutic for me. And I hope it has some impact on people. I want people to feel something when they see my work. I don't want them to think about what is going on here.
So yeah, there's a couple things. One is, I guess that's partly why you don't like to reproduce things over and over and over, because once you've proven to yourself that you can do it once, like, you don't feel the need. It's not a challenge for you, I guess.
Right.
And this is really a deep exploration of challenging yourself, be it emotionally or otherwise.
Yes.
And just when considering abstract art, if nothing evokes emotion quite like abstract art. You either hate it, you don't understand it, or you love it.
Totally.
I feel like that's why I like abstract art, just from the simple fact of, like, I know what pulls my heartstrings or just like pumps me up and or just like completely visually appears to defy physics, and you're just like, whoa, like how the hell is that thing made, for example?
Right.
If it's just cut and dry, but then you also have the other side of the coin where people are like, oh, well, that looks like a 4-year-old did it.
Right.
Okay, fine. That's your outlook or your viewpoint.
Yeah, and everybody responds differently to my work.
And that's what abstract art does.
Yes. If you had 30 people in the room and you said, "What's your favorite piece?" Everybody could, and 30 pieces,
different.
Everybody could. Right. It would be a different piece.
And see, that's what I think is cool.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Paul would probably agree.
Totally. And I totally agree with what you said. And when people walk in and see some of my, let's say they see a piece or they see a show, I can see a physical wave hit them. They walk in, there's whoa, like that. You could see that there's an energy that just kind of rolls through somebody.
Absolutely.
That to me is, I don't want to call it success.
I was going to say that you win.
But yeah, but that feels like that is what I like when that happens. That's
sure.
what I want to have happen.
Right.
Is that there's a tangible felt experience that happens for someone that they can be curious about, and they can, watch that unfold, when they're around the pieces.
Well, I mean, without sounding cheesy, it's a multitude of approaches, I think, because the emotion it took to make it. Mm-hmm. So seeing an emotion or an emotive reaction out of somebody is a validation point for you potentially, or anybody.
Totally.
And I think it's really cool because, be it safety in numbers, quote unquote, we're both being emotional creatures in this space, or misery loves company. I don't know how you want to define it.
Yeah,
but,
well, it's just
your negative emotion might spark something positive in somebody else. So then
totally.
That's the therapy, right?
Right, and I don't necessarily see these as negative, negative emotion pieces. I mean, for me, I do see that
miscalculation.
No,
verbally.
but there is that. But I just call it the authenticity, and I also think of it as a collaboration with nature. Ceramic is I think of fractals. Fractals is, why do things happen in nature? Like when you go to the beach and you see the water comes up on the beach, and you see those little waves in the sand. That's like a fractal. Or trees. The branches, they grow differently, but it's the same ratios in the way the branches are growing. That's very interesting to me how that happens in nature. Or surfers, I think. I don't want to speak for surfers, and I'm not articulate about surfing, but I think that surfers, when they're riding those waves, there's some very profound interaction with nature and natural forces that's very, stimulating. It feels very good for a surfer. Clay is like that, but it's a 3-week, ongoing day and night kind of collaborative process with the natural world and the nature of the energy of the world that I think it's, I don't know, it's very satisfying, I guess,
No, 100%.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what my work is, and like I said, I'm trying to make a statement about the over intellectuality of our culture that I don't think is healthy.
Right.
And it's not, I see a lot of, there's a lot of conceptual art out there and I just, it's hard for me to really connect with it. And I don't know. I feel like with the digital age and digital media and phones that there's a real need for balance. There's a need for experience, tactile experience, that we're missing, that people are missing these days. And so I feel like, clay in general is can be an activity that provides the more sensual, real felt experience that continues to be not happening with more phone usage and more technology. So I think that this will become more of a more popular art making and physical experiences.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, just to focus a little bit more on your business, for example.
Yes.
You've historically had these wholesale accounts.
Mm-hmm.
What's your distribution like now?
Well, I've gone through a lot of soul searching about the production. I built basically a brand new website that was focused on selling the production online. And I have, web marketing people, start to set up funnels of customers to, bring them to the website. And, I've questioned, is this worth it? Do I want to do this? And I basically said no. I don't want to do it anymore. I really don't want to do it. I thought when I started the production that I could hand it off to other people and I could make my art and I could just let staff make the pieces and fire the pieces and all that. And it's just not proven to be how it can happen. I'm always sucked in. I don't have the bandwidth to be creative and have a wholesale business going of the pottery. And when I'm dead and gone in 200 years, I don't think that my pottery is going to be, a mark on, the history of contemporary ceramics. I feel that my ability and my passion is being creative and my sculpture. And, doing the production it's taken me away from that. And I found that, although I have business ideas, I'm mathematical. I understand the concepts of business to a certain extent, not on a profound level or anything like that. I've learned that there's a huge distinction between having business ideas, understanding business, and implementing business. It's two completely different ideas. It's concepts.
Idea and execution
Definitely could not be further from each other.
Mutually exclusive.
So I thought that even though I understood, accounting and things and marketing, and even though I understood those things, I wasn't happy and I wasn't good at executing those things.
It's back to your dad, right?
Yes.
I have this idea, Dad.
Yes.
Great. How's it going to make money?
Right. And so I think I understand now that I'm a creative person primarily. I'm not a business person. I'm more of an artist. I'm more impulsive.
Well, you're definitely an artist.
Yes. I'm not an exceptional business person.
So what is the structure of the company then? You employ people?
I have employees, although I have less employees. Right now I have 2 employees. My wife is very good at helping. She takes the phone calls and she deals with orders and that sort of thing. I don't have that many orders at this point.
So she's one of the 2 employees?
No.
Oh, so
she's in addition to the 2. I have 2 that work in the studio with me, helping me.
Got it. Now, what are their responsibilities? Just loosely.
Glaze testing, firing, cleaning, making the tiles. So we're doing a house right now, which they're making the tiles for that, doing the things that I don't have to do. It's a lot of work to clean and maintain and fire and mix glazes and test and all of those kind of things.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm trying to cut it back. Like, honestly, I mean, I'm totally set up to do more slip casting and I have the equipment. So it's been very hard. And honestly, my dad was the one who really pushed me to do that. And I feel like this is one of the last like remnants of his influence. You know, when you have a business and you have a product and you have the infrastructure, you know, it's hard to just say, you know, like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
But I'm 50 years old now, you know, I'm getting older. How many more years, vital years, am I going to have left to work? You know, when I'm 70 years old, I'm sure I can make things, but you know, I've got some time to be happy, to make what I want to make. And I think that's what I need to do. I found ways to make money. I've done some real estate. I built a house where I put all of my ceramics in. I have done some architectural applications. I've made some things. I do commissions for the decorators and designers, which is okay. I don't love doing it, but you know,
it pays
it pays, you know.
Yeah. So you're finding a multitude of ways to make money in the craft.
Yes. I like real estate, and then I like doing houses. It's like doing a big sculpture. There's more money to be had. It's a better milieu of you know, financially, it's bigger. People have been asking me to teach classes. That's something I could do, is start doing some classes in here. Not so much. It's not so much about the money, but I tend to get a little lonely down here. It's a little bit isolating. You know, I have the girls that work with me, and that they're cool to be around, but I think I miss a little of the camaraderie of having like a studio, like an active studio with other people in there. So I've considered the integration of clay and Hakomi and writing a book and doing courses. But I still haven't spent like consistent time making sculptures, which is what I'm trying to focus on. And I've had some health issues that have limited my ability to work. I think this production was a safer place. This is real edgy to do this kind of thing. So the production is a little safer place to be busy, you know, sell some things, and it's not as challenging as like being creative on a regular, consistent basis.
So what would you define as being the hardest part of your business? What's the hardest thing to do? Or is it just thinking about the business aspect? Is it hiring those 2 people? How do you decipher who to hire, who not? Like, what's the hardest thing you would say, even leading up to this point? What was the biggest hurdle?
I'm thinking. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I think, you know, the hardest part for me has been the inconsistency of the glaze and not being able to reliably have a product. You know, that's why I always had my foot on the gas, on the brakes, because, you know, when I was getting all those stores, I could have been marketing, I could have been pushing, I could have been everywhere. But the more that I sold, the more I had to make, and the more that I had to make, the more pressure I was under to make, to get success out of those glazes. Yeah. So that was always a stress, and that was always a hurdle. It's very difficult to get things right, and thus it was difficult to really make profit. Even if you sold something for $700, if you had to make it 5 times, then you had to sell it for 50% of what the retail cost is. You know, is it worth it? You know, how much money was I really making in the end? So to me, that was like the biggest hurdle was the consistency of the glaze, and then just the struggle of, you know, it's not really making me happy to do the production. It just was not making me happy. And I had seen interviews with other potters that had tried to do production. They were like, oh, well, I've been down that road. I'm not doing that. Ceramics is a difficult material to work with. It's not easy to do production with ceramics. It's tough. It's a grind.
What's the easiest part?
When I'm working on a sculpture and I'm standing there at the table and I have my tools, I have a knife and I have a rib and I have a bucket of, sloppy clay and, I'm building something. To me, that's the best for me. Like, the world becomes simple. I can get overwhelmed, when I have a lot of things going. Things I can get thrown off and just feel like it's all too much. Then I can get frozen. When you're making a sculpture, it's like you're in that world, and it's a simple world. It's your knife, it's the clay, and that's it. And and there's nothing else at that time, and I think that, a day can go by. It's 5 o'clock. It's like, what? It's 5 o'clock? I've been doing this for 6 hours? What?
You've been riding the wave.
Yeah, you've been riding the wave. You've been meditating. It's like a meditation for that time. I think that's really the juicy. It's easy. It's like life becomes simple,
Right.
And I think that for me, that's a good thing.
Advice? Anybody who's in school right now looking to do it, what advice would you give those people?
Experimentation. Experiment. Don't take it too serious. You don't have to make, a Picasso. You're not going to make a Picasso. Don't care too much about what you make or what it is that you're doing at any given moment. Like, experiment. Try this, try that. If you're an artist, if I was starting classes, it would basically be about experimenting with your experience. Make something big, make something small, make it fast, make slow. See how you respond to all these different stimuli. Discover who you are as an artist. Pay attention to your experience as you try different things. And it's the same thing. Are you trying to, what is your career? What do you want to become as a person? You have to pay attention to your experience. How do you react? How do you respond to things? If you pay attention, you can know, I love being a business person. Like, I love the process of making a product and selling the product. Like, how are you in that process? How do you feel about it? And try different things and see, use your experience as like a guide for, discovering who you are as an artist, as an entrepreneur, or whatever it is that you want to do. Is you have to try different things and experiment, and it will be a struggle. That is the nature. I think that's the nature of, being a human, is there is struggle in that process, and struggle doesn't mean it's a failure, and failure doesn't mean that, you're going to continue to fail. So I think that's you're experimenting. There's failures, there's struggles, and you have to embrace, that exploration process to find, what is the best thing for you to do, whatever that is.
Well, okay, so you used to play sports.
Yes.
You're now a father.
Yes.
How many kids?
2 kids.
2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not in here in the studio, what are you doing? What do you have any other outlets? What do you do for fun?
Well, my son is an athlete, coincidentally. Well, no, it's not coincidental. He's my son. He's a good athlete. And so I usually leave the studio at like 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock. He gets out of school, and then it's his sports. I'm his advocate. I'm his manager. I'm his coach. It's been amazing. He plays basketball. He's really good at basketball. He did play tennis. He stopped playing tennis, but he was very talented at all those things. So I work with him a lot. My daughter is very bright. She does theater. She's the stage manager for the productions at her school, and she's very self-motivated as a student. Typically, my wife focuses on her activities and I focus on Isaac's activities, just because she's better suited for Gabby and with Isaac. So a lot of my time is spent being a dad, being with my kids, trying to be a good dad, working with him to be the best that he can be as a person, as an athlete. Other things that I enjoy, I would say the plants. I have a garden at the house. I really love working with the plants. Every day I'm up in that garden. I have fruit trees. I have exotic fruit trees that I grow and I shape and I prune and I love doing that. It's very much like doing ceramics, except a little more relaxing. I don't have to do as much. I can just kind of, guide things. So I love the plants. I like watching sports. I'm a big Knicks fan. I like guy things. I'm into cars. Like I have a pickup truck that I like driving around. I used to love my motorcycles, but now being a dad, I can't do that anymore, So I think my wife would, need to take like some kind of stress medication if I had a motorcycle. So
I've always wanted to ride motorcycles,
Yeah.
and I think every woman I've ever dated has always told me they would break up with me if
Yes.
I bought a motorcycle.
Yes, basically.
Well,
Yeah.
the old adage of there's two types of motorcycle riders, those who've been in accidents
Yeah.
and those who will be.
Exactly.
So I've always kind of had that in the back of my mind.
Yeah, and I'm cool with it. I let I had a whole life of motorcycles, so I'm cool with letting that go.
Sure. What other cars do you have?
Well, I used to have a Porsche. I used to have a 911. It was like a 2003, with the bad headlights, the egg
The
headlights.
996.
Yeah, I had a 996. It was a convertible that I bought, for like $25,000 or something like that. Remanufactured engine. It was totally sweet, manual transmission. I used to take it out with Isaac in the back and just
that's awesome.
tear it up in Dulzor. I loved it. I ended up selling it a couple years ago. So I don't have, and I'm a car guy, but I just have the pickup truck. I don't know. I'm due for a new pickup truck. I was thinking like, maybe I'd get a Raptor or some like fun pickup truck. That was like cool like that. Isaac would love that. So I don't know. Maybe I would do something like that. But and I used to have a Ford Bronco, like a 1971 Ford Bronco, like a redone Bronco.
Yeah.
I love those. Like that would be, that would be awesome like second car. So, it's a money thing though. If I could, Isaac's like, well, if you could, would you get a brand new 911? And I say, well, yeah, maybe, but
Yes.
not more than that. Like, I don't want to. He's
Right.
like, why don't you get a Lambo? And I was like, no, I'm never driving a Lambo. I don't care how much money I had. I wouldn't drive a Lambo. But a 911, that I could swing, a 911.
Sure.
So, no, I like cars. I love fishing. I take Isaac fishing. We go fishing in Alaska. I've taken him the last couple summers. We to go for a week in Alaska. I just took him down to Sea of Cortez, north of Cabo. We went fishing. So we do that. Yeah, so we do a lot of things together. I have a shotgun. I take him out to the range. We shoot sometimes. And he's been getting into that. And, guy things. So I like movies. I'm a foodie. I like good food. Rachel's cooking really good food all the time. So
I was going to just ask
we do
that.
a lot of good food. A lot of good food.
What is there a particular cuisine you gravitate towards?
I like Asian cuisines. Like I love Japanese. I like Thai. But I'm not exclusive to Asian. I like Asian, and Isaac loves Asian. He loves sushi. But I like all kinds of food. I love Italian. I like Mexican. I really like all kinds of foods. Growing up in New York, and I lived with my dad, we didn't cook anything. We had a stack of menus, 2 inches thick. And it's like, okay, what are we going to order for dinner tonight? Well, order Afghani food? Okay, sure.
Well, that's
order
New
it
York.
up.
That's New York for you.
So
you
I
have
was
that in your backyard.
Totally.
You got everything under the sun in New York City.
Yes. So I've been eating a lot of different kinds of foods, and I've traveled. I've been to India, and I've been to Japan and China, and I've been to a lot of places. So I enjoy all those cuisines. I love food. So food's a big thing that I love.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's a good life. I mean, as you get older, and you're a dad, and you have your kids and you're married, and then, that takes up a big chunk of your time. I don't have a ton of friends. I mean, I know a lot of people, but pretty much busy with the kids. And, I have my studio. It's some like associated people, you like through, your work and
real estate, and I have people, but I don't have a lot of like best friends that I pal around with. I'm mostly with Isaac and Rachel.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah. So life is, it's simple, it's full, and I tell young people that don't have a family, I said, it's okay. You're a guy. As soon as you're gonna have kids, you're gonna be just another schmuck on the back of the bus. Trust me. And that's what it's gonna come down to. And I was get a kick out of that. But
well, man, this has been great.
Yeah.
Again, thanks for having me here in studio.
Yeah,
And,
it's been great.
Showing me all that you got going on. I'm going to post some photos on the Instagram page, of course. Thanks so much, man.
No, thank you. I enjoyed it. It's always nice when someone's interested in you, and you get to tell your story, and so that's a cool thing. So, and thank you for your interest and giving me some space to be narcissistic and talk about myself for 2 hours.
No, man, this has been awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Well, really appreciate it.
Okay.
And hope to catch you soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
See ya. Wanted to send out another quick thanks to Josh for the great chat there in his studio. Thank you so much for sharing on such a personal level, as well as shedding some light on topics a lot of us try to sort out ourselves, especially the brand perception, and certainly how it is you go about your own creative process. Really appreciate you sharing all those details. Season 1 has truly been a blast, and I can't thank all of you enough for listening. Season 2's recordings have already begun, so stay tuned for those to be shared soon. As always, thanks to Clear Audio for the headphones, as well as Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the music, and for making these podcasts possible. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have creating these, so please feel free to drop me a line with any feedback whatsoever at standardhpodcast@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for the new episodes in a few weeks, because there's some really good stuff on the horizon. That's all for now. Stay tuned, and I'll catch you guys very soon.